Alright guys, this is gonna be a long-term review of my bike. My bike is a 2003 CBR600RR. So I got this bike about around October 2024. I've put around, 17,000 kilometers on it now. So I got it around 50,000 kilometers. So it's definitely not, like the mileage wasn't preserved, but it was definitely a bike that I knew was gonna be rough, and a bike I knew that was gonna be like a little bit of work, but it wasn't too bad. So I'm gonna just give a quick little history. So I got the bike back in October, like I said, October 2024, and it was low-sided, but it wasn't too bad. So the previous owner just cut the fairings. Like the original fairings that were left was the tail, the seat, the gas tank, and this top half of the front fairing cover, and also the front fender. So I'll put a photo of what it used to look like. So that's what it used to look like. And then I bought the full fairing kit. I kept it yellow, and then another thing that I bought was the sprocket kit. So new chain, new sprocket, and that's pretty much all the mods that I've done on the bike. It already has this exhaust that was I put on. It's a Jardine something. I don't know the exact exhaust, but we could start it up, listen to the exhaust. Sounds good. That's pretty much like the history of the bike, and I'll just start off with the things that I really like about this bike. What I really like about first is just the looks of the bike. I think it's like, when you look at something, like that like it's meant for business, or when it's meant for, like, you can see what it's meant for, and it's like it's meant to go fast. And that's what I really like about this design, is that I'm a really big fan of modern bikes, but I also really like how bikes back then also looked. Yeah, like the undertail exhaust, like this whole like sculpt to it, how it's like, it all comes to a point back here at the end. Yeah, and it's like also a very simple bike. So obviously number one would be the looks. Second thing I like about this bike is like it's very confidence inspiring. Like, I'm gonna just get this out the way, but this is like the first bike I've owned. It's not the first bike I've ridden, but it's the first bike I basically learned a lot of the things on this bike. And I wouldn't really necessarily recommend a 600cc as a first bike, but if you've ridden dirt bikes, or you have like decent self-control and you have the right fundamentals, I think the CBR is probably one of, in my opinion, the best kind of 600cc's to learn on, because with this bike, it hides its weight very well. I feel like all the weight is at the bottom of the bike, so it feels very planted. It doesn't feel very top heavy, and I think as a beginner, a top heavy bike is kind of like what it makes it scary to approach. So with this bike, the weight feels down in the middle, down at the bottom, and that's what makes it feel very approachable. And also the power delivery is very smooth, very linear. It's not something like, for example, an R6, where there's not a lot of low range to mid range, and then all the power hits you all at once at the top. So that's why an R6 would be a bad bike, because like it's hard to predict if you've never ridden a bike, especially 600cc's, because they're fast bikes, if we're keeping it real, right? But with the CBR, and I would say with the Gixxer as well, right? They make a lot of power, not say like at the at the very bottom, but at the mid-range, where you'd be keeping it most of the time. So that's where I feel like this bike is very approachable in terms of the weight and also power delivery, because you don't have to wring it out. You can ease into it, and it's not going to catch you off guard. Like, obviously there's going to be, you need to have like a good fundamental understanding of how bikes work. You need to have, I say, like at least some experience beforehand. Hey, yo, this freaking bird is gonna catch my stuff, bro. So, where was I? Yeah, so the power delivery of this bike is very good. The weight distribution is very approachable. And then the third thing I like about this bike is it's very confidence inspiring. So the one thing about the CBR is that it's very, like, the seating position, just to get on it. The seating position on this bike is very like, you're very like tucked in, right? Obviously, because it's a sport bike. But when you're like in this position, it feels very like it makes you want to go fast. If I were to keep it, put into one phrase, like once you're in this position, it makes you want to go fast. It makes you feel like you're ready to go. And that's like what I like about this bike, is that inspires you to go fast. Once again, going back to making sure that you have the right understanding, you have the right fundamentals about body positioning and stuff. Once you have that down, like, this bike really is a great platform for you to grow in. I wouldn't know too much about the other 600s, but this is just a long-term review of this bike. I haven't ridden enough other bikes to really compare, but in the small times that I have ridden other bikes, this bike feels very, very confidence inspiring, like I said, and also it feels very analog. So the overall feeling of this bike is very analog, very raw, but it's not too rough. Like, for example, like a V-twin Ducati or another, or just V-twins in general. They're very rough, but this bike is super, super smooth. So that's what I would like, or that's what I like when it comes to the feeling of this bike. And then one like big thing I like about this bike is definitely the sound. I really like the sound of this engine, of the inline four. I think one characteristic of the Honda inline fours is that it's a bit on the deeper end, but also has a more raspy note. Yeah, so I don't know. Let's listen to it one more time. Yeah, it has like a very deep, raspy tone, and that's what I like. And especially like once you go all the way up to 15,000 RPM, that's where the red line is. Oh man, it's just different level, bro. That's what I love about just motorcycles in general, like how you can rev them up so high, stuff like that. Okay, and then I guess next part would be dislikes. Yeah, I think obviously the biggest dislike is it's not the most comfortable bike, right? For long hauls. For me, my work and stuff I go to every day is pretty close, so it's not like 30-minute rides each time, where obviously that's where you would feel your back to start hurting. But on the occasional times that I do ride for like 30 minutes plus, like, you definitely feel it. One thing that does help is gripping the tank, but sometimes you just forget, and you just end up using your back to lift you up. I mean, like, the wind pushing up against you does help a little bit, but sometimes it's not enough. But that's what makes it feel uncomfortable for me. And then another thing that I would say I dislike, it's more so like a nitpick, but but like that, it's not more so the bike itself, but it's just bikes in general. Definitely a lot of police attention. I guess you're definitely profiled when you're on a motorcycle, especially like when it's bright yellow. So police attention, that's not necessarily the bike's fault, as I said, but it's just the motorcycles in general. So if you want to get into riding, that's one thing you should just remember. And then another thing that I dislike about this bike, oh my gosh, I don't want to put it there. Man, there's not really too much to dislike about this bike. Oh, I guess like one thing that I do dislike that I've been kind of dealing with for a bit is the electrical system. There was one time my bike died, like it was completely flat, but that was just the rectifier going out. Sometimes when it sits for a while, like this happened yesterday and before I went out to ride to this place, is like it wouldn't start. It cranks, like everything cranks. It has 12 volts, like the horn doesn't crap out, or the signals work or don't work. They all work, right? But it's just weird. So that's something that I've been chasing since I've owned it, like that crank no start issue, which is fairly common, but I don't know what's causing it, because I already replaced the rectifier. I don't think it would be the stator, because if it was the stator, then the bike would be freaking out every time I ride it. Yeah, I think that's all I would say about this bike. In terms of dislikes, I don't really have much to dislike about it. If you kind of like nitpick at this bike for not what it is, it's a sport bike. It's gonna be uncomfortable. It's a sport bike. It's gonna be very fast. It's not gonna be the best daily rider if you have long commutes. But for my lifestyle, it's perfect. It's comfortable. It gets the job done. You get compliments about it, and it sounds good, right? It's just such a good stress reliever. So that's like over the 17,000 kilometers I've I've owned this bike. Other than just the whole rectifier thing, going out and almost leaving me stranded, there hasn't been I don't have many problems with the bike. I've just done oil changes. My valve lash is something that I need to get sorted soon, and also change the tires. But that's just normal wear and tear on a motorcycle. So yeah, I'd say verdict for this long-term review is it's definitely a good bike. I don't think it would be the best bike for a daily rider if you were a bit older, if your back is a little, hey you going. I would definitely say that if you're looking for something that is very focused, race focused, for that very type of feeling, but still not too crazy, I would say this is just right in the middle of the 600 class, the 600 Super Sport class, right? It's very approachable. It's not too crazy like the R6. And it feels very nimble compared to the other 600s. I think that's what makes the CBR shine, is that it's a very nimble feeling bike, but it's not too crazy. So I would say 600, the CBR is right in the middle of the whole class. Maybe that's why some people find it boring, because it's in the middle. But I think this generation, this first gen double R is very, very approachable, very, very nimble, very race derived for sure, compared to say a Gixxer 636. Those I'd say were definitely a bit more bigger feeling bikes. I don't think that would feel as nimble, and it's also not like on R6 where it's go all the time. You got to ring it out to whatever RPM limit it has, 16,000 or whatever. Yeah, the CBR just lives right in the middle of all those bikes. Yeah, I don't think I'd change anything about it. This bike, Honda knew what they were doing when they were making this bike, but yeah, I just the biggest problem was just a rectifier. And then would I say that this is a good starter bike? I would say no. But if you've ridden dirt bikes, and you trust yourself enough to be on a bike like this, you have enough self-discipline, then yeah. But for the majority of people getting into bikes for the first time with no experience, I would definitely say no. Because once again, even though this bike is in the middle, I think, of the 600cc class super sports, this bike is definitely not the most beginner friendly. Because what I noticed about this bike, and I'm not sure about the other bikes, is that the littlest amount of inputs really make a big difference. So even squeezing the brake lightly, that's pretty sensitive. The clutch, if you let it out too fast, it's gonna catch you out, and you're gonna drop it in a turn. That's what that's what my friend did. He let out the clutch too fast, and he dropped it while going in a slow turn. And yeah, and obviously the throttle, the smallest throttle inputs can make a big change, especially on these very sensitive race derived inline fours. So if you're not gentle, if you're not smooth, and you're learning how to ride a bike, the 600s are fairly unforgiving, but that's just the nature of these super sports, right? So I would definitely say if you're a beginner, starting at 300, something more upright, something that isn't as bent over as a super sport, especially double R's, because your butt is really high up and you're very tucked over, and I'd say your knees are pretty high up. So it's not the most comfortable bike to learn on. It's not also the most forgiving bike to learn on. So you're definitely gonna learn your fundamentals if you're new beforehand, and then this is maybe something you could step up towards. Because even for myself, even though I've ridden a lot on this bike already, I feel I still have a lot more to learn, and I feel I could have learned faster if I started on a smaller displacement bike. But I've already ridden 17,000 kilometers. I haven't crashed. I haven't done anything stupid. I haven't low-sided, high-sided. Just respecting the bike. If you respect the bike, the bike will respect you as well. But, let's pray that that doesn't happen anytime soon of me crashing. So I would say that about this bike. But yeah, I think one thing that this bike does very well is just inspire you to be a fast rider. This bike also gets a lot of attention. I guess the color plays a part, but I mean it just looks so sick. But I just love this undertail exhaust. It's so cool. And And the sound, the sound is just too good, man. Like when you're in a tunnel, when you're just ripping down, when you're ripping down the alley or going down the street, and you get the echo going off the buildings. Ooh, it sounds so cool. What is there anything else I feel like I've missed? Would I change or exchange this for another bike if I were to do it again? I don't know, maybe. Once again, I haven't ridden too many other 600s, so I'd be like open to try. But I think I'm very happy with me starting on this. I was looking at a Gixxer, but I hear they have like they have a pretty wide seat for comfortability, but that kind of limits you from moving around. So that's just what I heard. I haven't really personally ride a Gixxer that much, but yeah, bro, this bike is for me. I love it. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't have put 17,000 kilometers over the course of a year and a half, right? So that's pretty much where I'll end this video. Yeah, this bike has been very, very fun, very, very fast, very, very, in a way intimidating, but this bike has been very good to me, and I'm very happy that, it turned out the way it is, especially with how I got it before. So I'm very excited on, what next bike I'll get, and I hope you guys enjoy this video.